The alien classroom was filled with noise, laughter, and chatter. Students from a dozen different worlds spoke in their own tones, some sharp, some musical, some almost like clicks of metal. They joked, traded stories, and argued about whose homeworld was the most dangerous, whose people were the strongest. The room was alive with voices, and the teacher, a tall silver-skinned alien, did not try to stop them. In this place, stories of survival were normal. After all, this academy was meant to prepare the brightest young minds of the galaxy for leadership. But everything changed when the human stood. He had been silent all morning, sitting at the back of the room, his eyes steady, listening but not speaking. Many students had already noticed him. The human was smaller than some of the towering reptilian races, less colorful than the bright-skinned avians, and far less intimidating than the armored insectoids. To many, he looked fragile, weak, out of place. Yet when he pushed his chair back, the sound was enough to cut through the laughter. His movements were calm, steady, almost deliberate. He did not rush. He simply stood, straightened his shoulders, and raised his head. For a moment, nobody spoke. A silence spread, one that seemed unnatural in such a lively room. And then he spoke. His voice was low, calm, but there was something in it that made the hair rise on the back of every neck. "On my homeworld," he said, "even children fight to survive." The words were simple, yet they carried a weight none of the others had expected. The laughter died instantly. The alien students turned toward him, their wide eyes blinking in disbelief. They could not understand. What kind of world would force its children to fight just to live? What kind of species would rise from such a place? For the first time, the classroom truly looked at the human. His face was young, like theirs, but his eyes were not like theirs. There was no naivety, no softness. Instead, there was an oldness there, something carved deep inside him by experiences they could not imagine. He had seen things, lived things, that none of them had faced. And they felt it in that single sentence. One alien, a green-skinned student with smooth features, laughed nervously. "You joke, human. Surely, you exaggerate. No world would put children in such danger. Parents protect the young. That is universal." The human turned his gaze toward the speaker. His expression did not change, but his silence made the alien's laugh die in his throat. Slowly, the human lifted his sleeve. Across his forearm, running from wrist to elbow, were scars. Long, thin, pale scars, marks that had healed but never faded. The students gasped. Some leaned back, others leaned closer, fascinated and horrified at the same time. On most civilized worlds, scars were rare. Injuries were healed quickly with advanced technology. Children were safe, guarded, sheltered. But here was proof, carved into flesh, that this human had fought, bled, and lived through something unimaginable. The human lowered his sleeve again and spoke, his voice steady. "This is not exaggeration. On Earth, we do not wait for danger to find us. It is always there. The storms, the beasts, the hunger. Even the ground itself is not safe. The smallest insect can kill with one bite. The air can freeze you or burn you. And the predators, they wait for weakness." The classroom remained silent. The teacher, who until now had watched in silence, finally stepped forward. His tall frame bent slightly as he peered at the human. His silver eyes narrowed. "And yet you stand here, alive. Tell me, human, how many from your people survive such a place?" The human looked up, meeting the teacher's gaze without fear. His lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. "Enough," he said. "Enough to learn. Enough to fight. Enough to become stronger than anything that tried to kill us." The words hung in the air like a blade. The alien students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. For them, survival meant comfort, safety, stability. For this human, survival meant battle, every day, from childhood. One of the reptilian students, scales glimmering under the light, finally spoke, his voice deep and mocking. "So you expect us to believe your world is worse than mine? My people hunt great beasts with teeth as long as our arms. We fight for glory, for dominance. Do you think your Deathworld, as you call it, makes you stronger than us?" The human's eyes turned toward him. Calm, steady, unflinching. "You fight for glory," he said. "We fight because if we don't, We die. The reptilian student's jaw tightened, but he did not reply. The quiet weight of the human's words pressed down harder than any insult. The human stepped forward, his hands open at his sides. On Earth, even the smallest creatures can kill. Even the weakest can survive if they are clever. We are not the fastest. Not the strongest. Not the sharpest. But we are survivors. We learn. We adapt. We never stop. Another alien, a delicate avian with feathers like silver, whispered to her neighbor, "How can such a species exist? How can they endure so much and still rise into the stars?" The whisper carried through the quiet room, and though she had not meant him to hear, the human did. He turned his head toward her, his expression still calm, but his eyes sharp. "We endured because the universe gave us no choice." The silence deepened. It was not only what he said, but how he said it. There was no boast in his tone, no arrogance. Only truth, spoken as if carved into his bones. For the alien students, who had grown up in safety, who had studied survival as an idea rather than a necessity, the human's words were more frightening than any threat. Because they believed him. The teacher finally raised his hand, breaking the silence. "Sit down, human. Your story is noted." But even as he said the words, his voice lacked authority. He spoke like someone who had glimpsed something dangerous and did not know how to handle it. The human did not argue. He nodded once and sat back down, folding his hands calmly on the desk. The classroom remained silent, the laughter gone, the chatter erased. Every student stole glances at him, as if seeing him for the first time. The green-skinned student who had laughed earlier now kept his eyes on his desk, his hands trembling slightly. The reptilian who had mocked him clenched his jaw, but did not meet his gaze. And the avian girl, feathers trembling, could not look away. The human simply sat, quiet once more, as though nothing had happened. But in every mind in that room, one thought now burned. If Earth could shape such children, what kind of warriors would their soldiers be? And though no one dared to speak it aloud, the unspoken fear remained. The human had said this was only what children faced. If that was true, what horrors awaited when he spoke of adulthood? The silence held. The class had begun with laughter, but it ended with fear. And the human, the quiet figure who had stood so calmly, had changed everything with just a few words. He had not shouted. He had not threatened. He had simply told the truth. And the truth was worse than any nightmare they had ever known. The classroom stayed quiet long after the human sat down. The silence was heavy, pressing down on every student in the room. They looked at each other, but no one dared to speak. Their earlier jokes about danger, their proud stories of strong ancestors, all seemed weak compared to what the human had just revealed. Some wanted to believe he was lying, that no world could be so cruel, but the scars on his arm told a truth that no one could deny. At last, the teacher's voice broke the silence. His tone was softer than before, almost cautious. He looked at the human as though he was studying a weapon that had been hidden in plain sight. "You said even children fight to survive. Then tell us, what else do they face on this world of yours?" The human lifted his head. His calm gaze swept across the room. The other students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their alien eyes wide, their bodies tense as if bracing for an answer they didn't want to hear. "Storms," the human said quietly. "Winds so strong they can tear houses apart. Lightning that strikes without warning, fire from the sky. Floods that swallow entire towns. Heat that can burn the skin. Cold that freezes bone. We are taught from the beginning to respect the sky, because it will kill us if we do not." One of the small, thin-bodied aliens whispered, "But what of your shelters? Your technology?" The human shook his head. "Shelters break. Technology fails. On Earth, you cannot hide forever. The storms always find you." The room felt colder. Many of the students had grown up in controlled environments. On their planets, weather was something predictable, managed, harmless. To hear of a world that attacked its own people without mercy was beyond their imagination. But the human was not finished. His voice remained steady, calm, but every word was heavier than the last. "And then there are the beasts. Creatures with claws longer than a man's arm. Teeth that can cut through bone. Hunters that see in the dark, that smell fear, that never stop chasing once they begin. Some strike from the skies, some from the seas, some from under the ground itself. There is no safe place. Not truly. On Earth, we are never beyond danger. Gasps filled the room. Several students leaned back in their chairs. A blue-skinned alien, his eyes wide, muttered, "That is not a planet, that is a nightmare." The human looked at him and gave the faintest hint of a smile, though there was no humor in it. "We call it home." The reptilian student who had mocked him earlier slammed his clawed hand on the desk, his pride stung. "Enough. These are stories meant to scare children. No one could grow strong in such a place. They would die before they could learn to fight." The human's eyes turned toward him again, calm as before. He did not argue. He only spoke. "And yet, here I am." The reptilian student's jaw tightened. His claws scraped against the metal desk, but he said nothing more. The human's presence was proof enough. The teacher leaned forward now, his curiosity overtaking his unease. "If this is true, then your people, your children, they must live in fear every day." The human's voice dropped lower, so low that the entire class leaned in to hear him. "Fear is not weakness. Fear is training. Fear teaches us to be ready. It sharpens us. It keeps us alive." The words made the room shiver. On most worlds, fear was considered shameful. Here, this human claimed it as a weapon. One of the avian students, her feathers trembling, asked softly, "But how do you endure it? How do you grow under such darkness?" The human's eyes met hers, and for the first time there was something else in his gaze, something deep, something heavy. "We endure because we must. We grow because we have no choice. On Earth, weakness is death. So we learn to be strong, even when we are children." The silence grew again. No one laughed now. No one spoke. Every student felt a weight in their chest, a realization they had never considered before. The galaxy had always whispered of Earth, of the Deathworld, but few believed it fully. Now they were beginning to understand. The human leaned back slightly, his voice still calm, still steady. "What you call horror, we call life. What you call impossible, we call normal. And every day it shapes us. Every day it forges us into something harder than before. We survive because we must. And because we survive, we become something else." He let the words linger. The students stared at him, their eyes wide, their faces pale, their minds racing. They had always thought themselves brave, strong, prepared. But compared to this human, they felt small. They felt fragile. The teacher's expression had changed. No longer stern, no longer doubtful. There was something in his silver eyes now that none of the students had seen before. Not respect. Not admiration. Fear. The human did not raise his voice. He did not boast. He did not need to. Every word he spoke carried a truth more terrifying than any threat. He was not trying to frighten them. He was only telling them what his people lived every day. And that, more than anything, was what left the class trembling. The lesson was not over. The human had only just begun. The class sat frozen, their notebooks forgotten, their pens still. Even the ticking clock on the far wall seemed louder than usual. No one wanted to break the silence, but everyone felt the same thing. The human had not shouted, he had not threatened, and yet the weight of his words pressed on them harder than anything they had heard before. One of the smaller aliens, pale-skinned with wide black eyes, finally spoke. His voice shook. "You speak of storms and beasts, of danger in every shadow. But how do we know you tell the truth? Words are easy. Anyone can say such things." The others stirred. Some nodded, relieved that someone had asked the question they all feared to voice. They wanted proof. They wanted a reason to dismiss his words, to convince themselves this nightmare world could not exist. The human did not answer at once. He reached slowly to the collar of his simple uniform and pulled it aside. A thin line, pale and jagged, ran across his chest. Another scar. He held their gaze as he traced it with his finger. "This," he said quietly, "came from a creature no larger than your hand. Its bite carried venom. I was 11 years old. The fever burned me for a week. My body nearly failed. But I lived." Gasps echoed through the room. 11 years old. On their worlds, children that age were still under constant care, learning in safety, protected from even the smallest harm. To hear that a child had nearly died from a creature no bigger than their palm was almost unthinkable. The human let his shirt fall back into place. His eyes remained calm, but the silence around him grew heavier. A brave voice broke it, a tall, thin alien with metallic skin and glowing eyes. His kind were known for their pride in logic, for never showing fear. You show us marks, yes. But scars can come from many things. Training, ritual, accidents. Stories can be shaped. Words can deceive. If your world is truly so terrible, then prove it. Prove it beyond doubt. The challenge hung in the air. Some students leaned forward, others leaned back. The teacher did not stop it. His silver gaze remained on the human, waiting. The human lowered his hand to the desk. He tapped his fingers slowly against the metal, then looked around the room. His voice stayed calm. You want proof. Very well. I will give you proof you cannot deny. He stood again. This time his movements were slower, more deliberate, as if the act itself carried weight. He pulled back the sleeve of his other arm. Not one scar, but many. Thin lines, deep cuts, ragged marks that crossed over each other like a map of pain. The classroom gasped again. One alien covered her mouth with her hands. Another turned his face away. For them, scars were shameful, things to erase with medicine, things to hide. Yet here stood a boy their age, his body a canvas of survival. The human's voice did not rise, but each word struck like a hammer. These are not training marks. These are not accidents. These are lessons. Every scar is something that tried to kill me, and failed. The metallic-skinned challenger opened his mouth, but no sound came. He stared at the scars, and whatever argument he had vanished. The reptilian student who had mocked the human earlier shifted in his seat. His tail flicked nervously against the floor. At last he spoke, his voice softer now, almost uncertain. But, how does a child survive such things? How do your people not fall into despair? How do you endure when the world itself tries to break you? The human looked at him. His expression softened, just slightly. His eyes were still sharp, but there was something else now, something quieter. Because we have no choice. Because we do not give up. Because every time something tries to kill us, we learn how to fight it, how to outlast it, how to be stronger next time. That is how humanity survives. Not through strength. Not through speed. Through will. A murmur spread through the classroom. They could not deny it. The proof was before their eyes. His scars told a story no words could shape. His calm voice told a truth no lie could carry. The teacher finally spoke again. Enough. Sit down. His voice was steady, but underneath it was something else. Unease. Doubt. Fear. The human did not argue. He lowered his sleeve, walked back to his desk, and sat quietly once more. But this time, the silence did not return to normal. It lingered, thick and heavy, pressing on everyone's chest. The alien students avoided his gaze. Some stared at the desk. Others glanced at him with wide, fearful eyes, then quickly looked away. None dared to laugh. None dared to speak carelessly. Because they knew now. He was not telling stories. He was not making boasts. He was living proof of a truth far darker than anything they had imagined. The scars were not just on his body. They were in his voice, his eyes, his very presence. And all of them understood one thing. If this was what a human child endured, what would an adult be like? The question burned in every mind, but no one dared to ask. The human sat quietly, his hands folded on the desk, his gaze distant as though remembering something far away. He looked calm. But to the rest of the class, he no longer looked like a student. He looked like a survivor of a world designed to kill. And they could not decide which was worse, the stories he had told, or the thought that he still had more to tell. The air inside the classroom felt heavy, as though the walls themselves pressed closer, shrinking the space. Every student kept glancing at the human, unable to shake the image of his scars, the calmness of his voice, the quiet way he had shattered everything they thought they knew about strength. The laughter that had filled the room earlier seemed like a memory from another life. The teacher stood at the front, his tall frame stiff, his silver eyes fixed on the human. His voice, when it came, was sharp, though beneath it was something unsettled. "Human," he said, "tell me the truth. Why are you still alive? Why are you sitting here in this classroom while so many dangers surround your kind? What makes you survive when others would fall?" The question hung in the silence. Everyone waited. The human lifted his head, his gaze calm as ever. He did not rush to answer. He let the silence stretch, the weight of it pressing harder, until even the bravest students shifted nervously in their seats. Then, in a voice quiet but steady, he spoke. "Because Deathworlds do not forgive weakness." The words landed like a blade drawn across stone, sharp and unrelenting. The students flinched, though he had not raised his voice. It was the way he said it, the absolute certainty, the truth that needed no proof beyond his existence. A green-skinned alien with large golden eyes whispered, almost to herself, "Deathworld, so it is true. Earth is not just dangerous. It is death itself." The human's gaze turned toward her. He didn't deny it. He simply said, "We call it home." The teacher narrowed his eyes. "And what of mercy? Compassion? Surely even on Earth, such things exist. Do you mean to tell us that your people know nothing but violence?" The human's lips curved slightly, not in a smile, but in something harder. "Mercy? Compassion? Yes, we have them. We hold them close, because the world tries to take them from us. We fight for them, because they are not given freely. On Earth, every kindness is stronger, because it survives against cruelty." The room fell quiet again. The students looked at him differently now, not only with fear, but with something else. A kind of uneasy respect. His words did not speak of cruelty alone. They spoke of strength born from struggle, of hope carved out of despair. But then one of the larger students, a hulking insectoid with a body like armor and eyes like black glass, leaned forward. His voice buzzed low and harsh. "Weakness is not tolerated, you say. Then what becomes of the weak among you? Do your people leave them behind? Do you cast them out to die?" The human turned his head, meeting the insectoid's unblinking stare. His answer came without hesitation. "No. We carry them. We fight for them. We bleed for them. Because tomorrow, it may be us who fall, and someone else will have to carry us. On Earth, strength is survival, but survival is never alone." The insectoid froze. His mandibles clicked once, then stilled. Around him, several students exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected brutality. Instead, they found something harder to understand, unity built on shared danger. The teacher's voice was softer now, more careful. "And this shapes you? This endless fight, this constant fear, it makes your people strong." The human's gaze did not waver. "It does more than that. It makes us relentless. We learn. We adapt. We do not stop, because stopping means death. Earth teaches us this from the moment we can walk. And once you learn such lessons, you never forget them." The silence that followed was suffocating. The students sat stiff in their chairs, their minds racing, each one imagining themselves on such a world, imagining the storms, the beasts, the poison in the smallest bite. None of them could picture themselves surviving even a day. Yet here sat the human, calm, steady, alive. One of the blue-skinned students leaned close to her neighbor and whispered, "If their children live like this, what must their soldiers be?" The whisper was not meant to be heard, but it carried in the stillness. A ripple of unease swept through the room. Every student thought the same question, but none wanted to voice it aloud. The human leaned back slightly in his chair. His eyes scanned the room, calm, unreadable. Then he said quietly, almost too soft to hear, "You still don't understand. I've told you only the beginning. You've not yet heard the worst." The room went colder. Several students shivered. The teacher's expression tightened, his silver eyes narrowing, but he did not speak. No one did. The human's words had fallen like a shadow across them all, a promise that more was yet to come. The silence stretched, long and unbroken, until even the hum of the lights above seemed too loud. And in that silence, every alien student in the room began to see the human not as a classmate, not even as an equal, but as something else entirely. A survivor of a world that should have killed him. A product of a planet that forged its people in fire and fear. A warning of what humanity truly was. And though he sat quietly, hands folded, eyes steady, the truth echoed in every mind. If this was what a human child could endure, then the galaxy had no idea what awaited when Earth's warriors arrived. The silence stretched on, but the human did not seem bothered by it. He sat with calm stillness, his hands resting on the desk, his gaze drifting as though his thoughts were far away. The other students, however, could not escape the weight of his words. Each glance toward him brought back the image of scars, the echo of storms, the shadows of unseen predators. At last, a voice cut through the stillness. It came from a slender alien with skin like polished stone and eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. His voice was sharp, as though he needed to push against the fear pressing on him. If your world is so cruel, then what of the night? Surely there must be rest. Surely danger does not follow you even into darkness. The human's eyes lifted slowly. For the first time, a faint shadow crossed his face, as though he recalled something he would rather leave buried. His voice remained calm, but it carried a darker tone. The night is the worst of all. That is when the hunters come. A ripple of unease moved through the classroom. Students shifted in their seats, feathers ruffled, scales twitched, antennae curled. The human's words came steady, unhurried, but each syllable pressed deeper into their minds. When the sun falls, the world does not sleep. The predators stalk under the cover of darkness. They wait. They listen. They smell the fear of anything foolish enough to move. You cannot see them, but they can see you. And when they strike, it is sudden, without warning, without mercy. He paused, letting the silence fill with the weight of his memory. There are storms that rage through the night, he continued. Thunder that shakes the earth. Lightning that blinds your eyes. Rain so heavy you can hardly breathe. And in that storm, in that dark, the predators hunt still. On Earth, there is no rest. Even in sleep, you must be ready. The classroom trembled with quiet. One of the avian students clutched her feathers tighter around herself, her voice breaking. But, how do you live like that? How do children survive such nights? The human looked at her. His eyes softened slightly, but his answer was still hard. We learn. We listen to every sound. We watch every shadow. We keep fire burning to push back the dark, but even fire does not always keep them away. Fear teaches us. It sharpens our senses. It keeps us alive. The insectoid student with black glassy eyes clicked his mandibles in disbelief. Fear. Fear is weakness. It makes you slow. It makes you break. The human turned his gaze on him, calm but sharp. On Earth, fear is not weakness. It is training. It tells us when danger is near. It tells us when to run, when to fight, when to hide. We do not let fear control us. We use it. The insectoid fell silent. The argument died in his throat. The human leaned forward slightly, his voice lower, more dangerous in its quietness. On your worlds, fear may mean cowardice. On Earth, fear is survival. Those who cannot learn from fear, die young. The room chilled. None of them doubted him. The reptilian student who had mocked earlier tried to shake the weight from his shoulders. His deep voice rumbled, though it lacked the same confidence as before. You speak as though danger is a teacher. But what lesson could be worth such pain? The human's eyes met his, unflinching. The lesson that nothing is safe. That you must be ready for anything. That strength is not enough, speed is not enough, weapons are not enough. Only will matters. The will to endure, the will to fight when every bone in your body screams to give up. That is the lesson Earth teaches us. The reptilian's tail twitched against the floor, restless, but he said nothing more. The silence around him told him no one else was willing to argue either. The teacher, who had stood quietly through it all, finally spoke again. His voice was lower now, heavy, almost thoughtful. And this is what shapes your people? This endless struggle against storm, against night, against predator. The human nodded once. Yes. From the moment we are born, the world tries to take us. We grow strong, or we do not grow at all. Every day, every night, every season, Earth tests us. And those who survive carry the strength of all who did not. His words lingered, and the students shuddered. None of their worlds were like this. Their dangers were rare, controlled, managed. To them, the idea of constant threat was madness. Yet here was proof, alive, breathing, speaking, that such a world did exist, and that humanity had not only endured it, but risen into the stars. The human leaned back again, his gaze drifting, his expression unreadable. He spoke once more, softly, but every ear strained to hear. On Earth, the night is never empty. It always hides something waiting to strike. And when you've grown up in such a place, you never forget it. Even here, even now, I still listen to every shadow. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. The classroom, once full of laughter and noise, now sat frozen under the weight of his words. And in their silence, each alien student imagined themselves under Earth's sky, surrounded by storms and predators in the dark. None of them wanted to imagine further. But the human had more to say. And they all knew the worst was yet to come. The air in the classroom felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves leaned closer to catch every word. No one dared to speak, yet all eyes were locked on the human. He sat with the calmness of someone who had lived 100 storms, who had walked among shadows that could tear flesh from bone. His stillness was more terrifying than anger. One of the smaller students, a feline-like creature with soft silver fur and trembling whiskers, finally broke the silence. Her voice was almost a whisper. If danger never leaves, how do you sleep? How do you close your eyes when the dark itself wants to take you? The human's gaze shifted toward her, slow and deliberate. He did not smile. He did not offer comfort. We learn to sleep lightly, he said, his tone flat. Our ears never forget the sound of snapping branches. Our skin feels every change in the wind. Even in dreams, we are ready to wake. The feline student lowered her eyes, ears folding back. The weight of his words pressed down like a shadow. Another voice rose, hesitant, from the back of the room. It was the avian student who had mocked him before, though now his feathers lay flat, dull with unease. But you cannot live like that forever. Surely you must grow weary. Surely fear must break you. The human's eyes found him, piercing and steady. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. We do grow weary. Many break. But those who endure become unbreakable. The avian swallowed hard, unable to hold his gaze. The human leaned forward, resting his arms on the desk. His eyes, sharp as steel, swept across the room, meeting each alien gaze in turn. You want to know Earth's secret. It is not strength. It is not speed. It is not weapons. It is the will to endure what should have broken us long ago. That is why I am here. That is why humanity walks among the stars. The students shifted, restless, unsettled. None dared to laugh now. None dared to even look away. The teacher, his face unreadable, spoke at last. His voice carried a strange tone, not disbelief, not mockery, but something closer to respect. And what lesson do you bring to us, child of Earth? The human paused. His silence was sharp, deliberate, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low and steady, carrying the weight of storms. That comfort makes you weak. That safety makes you blind. You look at fear and call it an enemy. On Earth, we call it a teacher. You will never understand us until you understand this. Fear is the forge. And only in the fire of fear do we become strong. His words struck harder than any blow. The classroom sat frozen, every heart echoing with the truth they had just heard. None of them had ever thought of fear as anything but weakness. Yet here was a human, forged by storms and shadows, proving otherwise simply by existing. The silence stretched, but this time, no one dared break it. The human had seized it, and all of them could feel it. He was not finished. He had only just begun. The silence felt alive, crawling across the room like a living thing. Every alien student waited, their minds restless with images of unseen predators and storms that tore through the night. But the human sat quietly, as if choosing carefully what to reveal next. His eyes were steady, but deep inside them, there was something heavier, something unspoken that even he seemed reluctant to share. Finally, his voice broke through the stillness, quiet and low, but sharp enough to draw every ear. You want to understand? Then I will tell you a story. The class leaned closer. Some held their breath without realizing it. I was 8 years old, he began. Old enough to run, too young to fight well. The storms had rolled in that night. Lightning tore across the sky, thunder shook the ground, and the rain fell so heavy it drowned out every sound. My family lived near the edge of the woods, and when the night was like that, the predators came closer. He stopped for a moment, his eyes flickering with memory. None of the students moved. My parents kept the fire burning. They told me to stay quiet. But even through the storm, even through the thunder, I heard it. His voice dropped, softer, almost a whisper. Breathing. Too close. Too heavy. Something was circling our shelter. Several students shifted uneasily. The reptilian scales clicked against his chair. The avian student's feathers shivered. I looked out the window. I shouldn't have. But I did. And there it was, in the dark. 2 eyes. Yellow. Watching. Waiting. His hand lifted slightly, as though showing them the memory. The storm lit its shape for just a second. Tall, bigger than me, bigger than my father. Teeth that shone like knives. And it did not blink. It only watched. A shudder rippled across the room. Some students looked toward the door, as though expecting those yellow eyes to appear. I couldn't scream. I couldn't breathe. My parents moved in silence, setting spears by the fire. They didn't even speak. They knew what was out there. They knew it was waiting for the fire to die. And all I could do was sit there, listening to its breath, knowing if the fire went out, if we slipped even once, it would come. The human's voice grew harder, sharper. That was the night I learned what fear really is. Not the fear of pain. Not the fear of death. But the fear of knowing something stronger than you is waiting in the dark, and you can do nothing but endure until the sun returns. The classroom was dead silent now. Even the hum of the holoscreen seemed distant, muffled under the weight of his words. The insectoid clicked nervously, his voice cracking. And, what happened? Did it take you? The human's eyes narrowed. A long pause filled the room before he answered. It waited. All night, it waited. And when the sun rose, it was gone. But I never forgot those eyes. They are still with me. Even now. A shiver passed through the students. Some couldn't help glancing at the shadows in the corners of the room, half expecting glowing eyes to be staring back. The human leaned back, his expression calm once more, though the tension in the air only grew heavier. That was just one night. On Earth, there are thousands like it. We grow up with them. And that is why we endure. Because we have no choice. The teacher, who had remained silent, finally drew in a slow breath. His voice was heavy, burdened with thought. And you survived such nights as a child. Then tell me, his gaze sharpened, his words deliberate. What does a human become when he grows to adulthood? The question hung in the air like a blade. Every student turned back to the human, their eyes wide, their hearts uneasy. The human did not answer immediately. He let the silence burn deeper, let their fear stretch tight, and when he finally spoke, his words were calm, too calm. What do we become? His eyes glinted, dangerous, unyielding. We become the monsters that once hunted us. A collective shiver spread through the classroom. None of them doubted him.